Oh,
It's bright.
that's strong light.
Yeah, and helpful.
This is
Very bright. Where's the mouse? Yeah, propose that we start. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Vincent Biruteau, and I'm the head of unit responsible for competitiveness, digitization, research and innovation at the European Commission, Directorate General for Energy. And I'm very glad to open that session on research and innovation in the building sector. It's a very important topic that we will be discussing this afternoon. You all know, if you're in the room, I guess you have some interest in buildings, so you probably know that buildings represent 40% of the energy used in Europe. There's still a large untapped potential for energy savings and renewable energy production, and that's what we want to discuss. In particular, in the renovation of buildings. And that's a topic that has been very high on the agenda of the European Commission, as you know. We've been addressing this issue since I've started to work in the European Commission. So that's more than 20 years ago that we've been talking about increasing the sustainability of buildings. And as a matter of fact, the building sector has been the focus of several initiatives that we have put in place. And if I just mention two important ones in the last 3 years, I would mention the renovation wave strategy that was adopted in the 2020, and that aims at doubling the renovation rate by 2030 and contains a number of measures that are quite ambitious. And more recently, the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the EPBD. And the proposal was met back in December 2020. The negotiations are still going on, actually, still in trialogues with the Parliament, the Council, the Commission. So this is work in progress. But I'm touching wood because we hope that there will be soon an agreement by the co-legislators. So we expect an agreement by the end of the year, hopefully. And then the revised EPBD will be adopted and then transposed and implemented in the member states. But that's not all. I mean, I wouldn't limit the actions on buildings to the EPBD and the renovation wave strategy, because this important topic is addressed in other pieces of legislation. The Energy Efficiency Directive, obviously, which revision was published in September this year. That's a major achievement in the field of energy efficiency. And the Directive on Renewable Energy Sources, which also contains provisions for addressing sustainability in buildings. And the Renewable Energy Directive was revised as well and adopted recently. That's another major achievement. It's also being addressed indirectly, I would say, through the eco-design and the European Sustainable Product Regulation that is under negotiation as well, because it will set some requirements for energy-using products, and not just look at the energy used, but also at all the circularity principles and how we can make products more efficient, more circular. And it is also being addressed through the Net Zero Industry Act, which is under negotiation now, but it's a proposal that was made in March this year, and which lists a number of strategic energy technologies for which the European Commission is proposing to boost the manufacturing capacity. And among these technologies, there are smart grids, and included in this definition of smart grids, there are building automation and control systems. So we are addressing also energy efficiency in buildings through that tools. That's on the legislative side. We've been also quite active on the funding side. On deployment, of course, you probably know about the Recovery and Resilience Facility that was launched after the pandemic and help people recover, people and government to recover from the crisis, which was recently reinforced to help member states also phase out fossil fuels coming from Russia. And member states have prepared recovery and resilience plans, and recently they have revised these plans or are in the process of revising them to increase support for energy efficiency and renewables. And a big amount of this funding has gone to energy efficiency in buildings. So that's on the deployment side, and that's really making a difference. But one should not forget that research and innovation is also important in that sector, and that's precisely what we're going to discuss about that. And funding has been made available also in the different programs that we've had. Most noteworthy is the Horizon Europe program, where we have one cluster, which is Cluster 5, which is addressing mobility, climate, and energy. And in there, as the panelists will explain, there is funding for addressing the energy efficiency, but also the circularity and the production of renewable energy in buildings. And that's a significant amount of money. It's not just Cluster 5, by the way, it's also Cluster 4, which is in Horizon Europe, because the Cluster 4 is addressing materials, and that we will be talking about that also today, so this is relevant. We're also funding research and innovation in buildings through the Cities Mission, and also, of course, through the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, and through the Driving Urban Transition Partnership, both being very important tools as well to drive research and innovation. In the set plan, we've got an implementation working group on buildings. We've got one also on the positive energy districts, which are important. And in that session, we will talk about what's been achieved in research and innovation in that sector and see what's coming in the future, in particular in the context of the revised set plan. We'll focus on research and innovation, but we'll give more focus on digital solutions and new materials. And we will start that panel by presentation, an overview of projects that have been supported in this area. So I've introduced the panel now. Starting on my left-hand side at the end is Isabel Pinto-Cepa, who is the lead for EU strategic policies and networks in VTT. She's member of the steering committee of the European Construction Technology Platform, and she's also a member of the board for the Build for People Horizon Europe Partnership. Mikael, sitting next to her, is director of the sustainability area of Eurecat, and he belongs to the board of directors of different organizations. Mikael Rovira, I should say, your full name, because it doesn't show on that screen here. And Mikael has a long career in applied research in circular economy, climate resilience, and environmental quality. And finally, Gordon Sutherland is sitting here and is a team leader for energy efficiency in smart cities in the European Commission's Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, also known as CINEA. And he's got a very long experience in research and policy support in the field of energy efficiency and energy performance of buildings. So I'm very glad to give him the floor now to give you an overview of what's been supported under Horizon Europe and even Horizon 2020 before. Gordon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vincent, and thanks for introducing the panel. I'd also like to say thanks to the organizers, the Spanish presidency. Everything has been super well organized. I only have one complaint. And I always have this complaint that we never have translation from Scottish into English. So I will try to speak very clearly and get over my Scottish accent so that you can actually understand what I'm presenting. So that said, yes, indeed, Vincent mentioned that as a young engineer, he didn't say that, but as a young engineer in 1989, I did my first energy audit in buildings after doing a master's in energy conservation and the environment. And since then, I spend my days looking at the energy performance of buildings, how it's calculated, how it can be improved. And in 2006, I joined the European Commission institutions, and I've been working on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and research now in the field of energy efficient buildings and the climate neutral building stock. So what I'd like to do is just to give you a very brief overview of the history to date, shall we say, of how we have arrived and where we are going. as regards arriving by 2050 at a decarbonized building stock. The basic research orientations are really driven by this climate neutrality goal by 2050. An overview here of what we do on the slide, it's more as a backdrop, I will explain it. Cost-effective energy renovation, fundamental to reaching a decarbonized building stock. The urban context and the building level, they differ, and so we look at both of these up to even a district level in terms of positive energy districts. The topics are covering people, people-centric, environmental impact, resources, and climate adaptation. And looking at buildings as an integral part of the energy system. What does that mean in practice? Well, we have specific thematic areas under Horizon Europe Destination 4. The research isn't limited to that destination, but if we keep unfolding the research, we will cover, as Vincent said, a very large part of Horizon Europe. I will focus on the Destination 4, and we have a thematic area on deep renovation. We have a thematic area on energy performance certification of buildings, a thematic area which is looking also at big data and the use of data, smart buildings and demand response. And parallel to that, we also look at the energy performance of data centers, which is growing continuously as we use more and more data. And finally, we have the urban dimension, or sustainable neighborhoods, and parts of positive energy districts, these are the thematic areas which we are covering. I would like to focus, though, today on the building level, the building itself, and not extend into the urban dimension, because that's really another very complex topic, in addition to just looking at a complex system. As a building, which, if you can imagine, is basically an outdoor factory, where every single product which is made is different from any other product which is made, and every user of that product uses it differently. And that's the complexity of working on energy performance in buildings and reducing that energy performance. Now, just an overview. Here we are. I have placed, and this is something that people often do, they place their own subject in the middle of the slide. And indeed, here we have, at the moment, over 100 ongoing projects on buildings, heating and cooling, sustainable districts and neighborhood, which I mentioned. Round about that, in other parts of Horizon Europe, you have the work on climate action, which also looks at buildings and climate impact. You have the part on cultural heritage, again, looking at buildings, and you have the part on the circular economy. There are a number of projects, and so this extends into multiple parts of the research program. In parallel, as part of history, there was a set of 85 projects under the energy efficient buildings public-private partnership. These have now finished. But the same team of people who manage the 100 ongoing projects and some overlap and crossover amongst the colleagues means that about 20% of those energy efficient buildings from the public-private partnership projects were actually managed by this same team. And in parallel, we also have roughly 50 projects on buildings and heating and cooling, which are looking at the market uptake of market-ready solutions and overcoming legislative barriers, financial barriers, behavioral barriers, and trying to overcome to get the solutions taken up and have a market penetration of these solutions. Just to give you a bit of insight into the one part of the research which is done together with industry. First of all, there are no numbers and budgets in this slide, but I can tell you that the team is managing an overall budget of 820 million euros over the 7 years of the framework program. 600 of those are for energy efficient, energy performant buildings, and roughly about 100 of the 100 million is for cities, and the rest is, or cities or urban dimension, and the rest is for energy efficiency in industry. I'm going to focus today just on the part which is about the energy efficient buildings. It's more or less roughly split 400 million euros for the public-private partnership, which is the co-programmed partnership called Built for People. And then there's another 200 million, which is on energy-centric, focused only on the energy aspects which need to be looked at. Typically, that may be buildings as nodes in an energy system. Smart buildings as a node in the energy system. So within this, actually, the original energy-efficient buildings public-private partnership was launched in 2008 because there was another crisis already in 2008. And in order to overcome the financial crisis, there was the energy-efficient buildings, or part of the process was energy-efficient buildings public-private partnership, which was led fundamentally by industry with industrial technology-focused topics. To develop new technological solutions. And I'll present some of the results of this just towards the end of this presentation. Nevertheless, the new co-programmed partnership, it's really people-centric, and it extends beyond energy. It extends into environmental impact of buildings, extends into materials, use of materials, accessibility, all aspects of the built environment. So the research under the Built for People partnership is much broader, and it also involves the social actors, and I'll come to this afterwards. Just this slide, I really just wanted to focus a little bit on how it's all implemented under this Destination 4. It's called Efficient, Sustainable and Inclusive Energy Use, aiming at a highly energy efficient and climate neutral building stock. The interesting part is what I was mentioning about the joint approach with industry, to have on the one part the energy focus, and then on the other side a holistic approach looking at multiple topics and covering such things as cultural heritage. So we recently closed a call for proposals looking at solutions for cultural heritage and the renovation and management and energy performance of that type of building. Now, this whole approach has been set up as a continuously evolving research agenda. It starts at the top from the societal challenges and needs. It goes through a policy response in order to deliver, and our main policy is to get to the decarbonized building stock by 2050, to come up with the research evidence, to co-create all of that with now also with the broader society, industry, and the societal players, and then to put this into research projects. What may not be apparent is that the research projects, well, from the point when somebody starts to write the research project, it will typically take 18 months before it becomes a contract and the research can actually start. And then typically those projects, they are running for anything from 4 until 5 years. And so the results of the research are only appearing maybe between 5 and 6 years after the concept. And so in order for us, for our pit stop at 2030, the last chance now to make a big difference through research in 2030 is really from these calls for proposals, which we will do this year and next year. The next calls for proposals will go towards the 2050 targets. Now, from that, then I wanted to just take this point, and this is where I need my notes, and I apologize, but where do we actually stand? So the two issues which we are discussing today, the large-scale harvesting of data, it offers endless possibilities for analysis. And you will hear the words big data dropped left, right, and center. And I could say we're looking at big data, and then everybody would assume we know what we're talking about. But actually, I'm not sure that we do all know what we're talking about. So what is big data? I think this is the first thing we should say. What is the big data? Well, it's typically a complex set of data which we, with our simple human brains, cannot quite manage to analyze and digest. And it is also something which our classical or traditional computing systems cannot deal with. The other issue is material technology. Before I move on, just to say that the data itself is not saving any energy. It doesn't save energy. What saves energy are the actions which are taken based on the insight which is given from the analysis of the data. And that's why when we have large data sets, we can really start to see the trends and performances of the building stock, and we can start to make informed decisions about how to invest in moving forward to more energy performant buildings. But the data itself is just data. What we need is the insights. The next point that we'll be discussing today are the material technologies. And I am highlighting that it's not just the material technologies and innovative new materials, but we need to look to the past as well. We need to look at existing traditional materials and how they could be combined to create innovative solutions together with new materials or not, but to look at ways of using those materials which is safe for human health, where we have bio-based materials. And then the final point where I just want to make this, and then there'll be hopefully an interesting discussion about this, is that by using the data to have insight into the building stock performance, using the new material technologies, we can then move towards what's an effective renovation, because the effective renovation is the one thing which we must do to the building stock in order to reach our energy performance goals for buildings, because without renovation, then it's just not going to happen. So these all taken together are the things which I believe need to be dealt with, but not one by one. They need to be dealt with holistically, and again, they're part of a bigger puzzle. That's my few words, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for giving us this overview and making the link to the subject of this panel, which is buildings in general, but with a focus on materials and data. And we'll have the opportunity during that discussion also to dive into concrete projects. So I'm sure you will give us also some good examples of what you have supported at CINEA. But before I start with questions, perhaps a reaction from you, Isabel and Michael, on that presentation. If you think there are areas which are particularly important and you would like to insist on. Perhaps Isabel, first reaction on what you heard?
Is this working? Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. Now it's working. Yeah, first of all, thank you. And thank you for organizing this session and for the invitation. I would actually, this last slide was very good. Thank you. Not that the others were not so good, but they were a bit of a capture what has been done. And I think these three elements are really critical. But I would pick mostly the energy efficiency and the role of the buildings in the flexibility, in contributing to the flexibility of the energy system. And I will pick it this morning for the ones of you that were in the panel. This was touched, the flexibility of the energy system. But usually when it's discussed, and this morning was not an exclusion, we talk about sector integration more with the transport, with the energy-intensive industries, and buildings are there, and they are say it's important to contribute, but usually they are almost like they are the consumers. We need to integrate, we need to become the system needs to become effective in order to abate these sectors like the buildings. But I would like to turn it a bit, because I think this presentation shows it well. Has been accumulated the number of projects in the energy efficiency buildings partnerships, the number of research projects, and the combination. And buildings, well, yes, we have to solve the 40%, but we have also to see them as a player in the flexibility of energy system. I mean, they have a huge potential. They have a huge potential to store energy, to store electricity, to store heating, and to be integrated and provide flexibility, almost like building as a battery, but I'm not talking about putting batteries in buildings physically, okay? And for that, I mean, that works if the data is available, if the buildings are digital ready, and I'm deliberately not using the smart building word because I think it's a bit overused into tons of sensors. I'm talking about the energy management system of the building can use this data so it can capitalize in all this research, in all the AI, in all the data, in order to connect to other buildings, in order to connect to the system as an element. But for that, it needs to be seated at the table of sector integrator as a sector. and not being seen as the one we need to abate, which is true, we do. I'm not putting aside the challenge, but I'm just saying that maybe we need to turn and talk about the potential. And then when you join that, that's why I particularly like the last slide, when you join that with the renovation wave, which, yes, is a must-do, again, a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do it in a coherent way. So we join that with the advanced materials, with deep renovation, and we might also generate a new set of building services, having the building as an element for the flexibility of the energy. So it's a combined effect. But I would say that we need to sit at the same table in the sector integration.
Well, thank you very much for insisting on that role of buildings and providing flexibility in the energy system, which is what we need. I mean, that's as the penetration of renewables will increase over the years. I mean, that's a very good point. Miguel, perhaps, Miguel, you could say a word on EURECAT as well, to begin with, because I'm not sure it's familiar to everyone in the room.
Yes, EURECAT is a technological center of Catalonia. We are located here in Barcelona and several locations in Catalonia, and also we have an office in Santiago de Chile. So basically we do applied research for companies in order to make them more competitive. Okay?
And your reaction to that presentation?
Yes, the presentation was excellent, Gordon. Thank you very much. And I like very much this people-centric approach. I mean, we do all this research for people. I mean, the planet is there, and the planet doesn't care about climate change and these kind of things. Persons, we do. So I think this is a very important issue because, for example, now in Spain, we have families that has difficulties to afford the bill of energy. Here is very expensive. And going to a more technical issues, I would like to take, you have shown many projects, Gordon, and you mentioned the link with circular economy. I think that materials offer the possibility to decarbonize the buildings because of, for example, insulation properties, but also circular economy is very important because if we do a proper use of materials, we can reduce a lot greenhouse emissions. So I think that materials has a double effect on buildings, the circular economy, and I think we can talk about circular architecture, okay, and then because of the energy saving itself. And finally, I think that you have shown us, Gordon, that in a building we have a new raw material. We have data as a raw material, and then what we need is to learn how to take the information and to use this data in order to increase energy efficiency.
Thank you very much, Miguel. And you mentioned the circularity, circular materials, the use of data to save energy, promote renewables. I mean, do you have, you said EURECAT is also a research center. Do you have concrete examples to mention, I mean, in that particular field, either materials or data?
Yeah, we have a project, European project, Clima Build Initiative,
yeah,
in which basically we are, with other partners of Europe, we are developing new materials that we need to scale, we need to test, we need to validate in order to reach the market. And these materials, basically, they has, depending on the case, they has good isolation properties, and also they are able to they are also good for harvesting energy.
Yeah.
So we are just in this project, it will finish in 1.5 years. So we are still developing the research, but we are getting interesting results. And for example, at EURECAT we have launched a new building, and thanks to the project, we have constructed what is now the building of the Climate Resilience Center, which is located in Amposta, in the Ebro Delta, one of the more critical areas regarding climate change adaptations. And we have made a new building based on wood, based on waste materials, rice waste linked to the rice production, because in this area you have many rice production. So we try with this building to show that it is possible to have sustainable buildings and in some way to increase the awareness of the visitors, and we would like to have some kind of replication with this example. And of course, the building is fully sensorized because now we are getting data about the behavior of the building, and in some way, this is a living lab. We call them, this is a real living lab because the people is working there, but now also we want to analyze the data. This building was inaugurated just two weeks ago, so I cannot show you.
Could have visited it.
next conference, I hope we can give you good examples.
Well, that would be super interesting. Yeah, thanks a lot, Miguel. I mean, I'm turning to you, Isabel, because I'm sure you've got plenty of very good projects as well, and the VTT is very, very famous, and you've supported hundreds of projects.
Yes, I think we'll be all day, and everyone would be sleeping if we'll continue doing Under. But maybe I'll continue a bit to Miguel. I mean, I actually was, and I would like to come back still to the digital and to the data, because I think it's critical. But before I go there, because what Miguel said is really important, especially the demonstrations and this kind of buildings, because we have to see that buildings is where we live. So whatever material we put there, we don't want the roofs to fall in our heads. So I know that there's many others like airplanes and everything that is critical, but it is critical to have these test beds. And coming from Finland, I actually will bring one that we have in common here with Spain, which I need to look to my notes because it's a hard word to say. That it's Bazahan. I'm looking there. Is it going good? That's the name of the project, which means a god that takes care of the forest in Basque, is done with Finland. And it's exploring the utilization of wood in all this context, but at the same time conserving the forests. So this is an example bringing here. It's also building demonstration buildings in Finland, in Spain, and in other countries in the projects. But the target is to be able to use engineered wood products, building per square meter the less, being wood, but using the less wood as possible for the structural, for the comfort, for the energy efficiency. And I think this is also critical because it gives a good balance. But going back to the data, sorry, because it's all my thing, I will bring, so in these projects that Gordon presented, also still in H2020 and continue now through Horizon Europe, there was many digital twins related projects. So I'll bring, there's one example, the Sphere project, for example, that is finishing now, where there's the BIM-based digital twins. I know the digital twins is a hype word now, used everything, we heard this morning as well, but when it comes to the buildings, is highly promised when it's very well connected with the BIM-based. I mean, the build information models, the building have been developed for 20 years. They are used by the architects, by the structural engineers. When you connect that, like in this FAIR project, build a digital twin based on that, feed in AI, feed in the large amount of data, so prepare for that, and then it's able to support the decision-making through all building life cycle, including the circular economy perspectives. So the digital twins and going back to the flexibility, so once it helps the building, it helps the decision-making from cost efficiency to construction, to the management of the building, to the life cycle management. I mean, it's the future, but it's, again, also part of the preparation for having the buildings digital ready for then integrate them in the energy system. Integrate them with the other buildings, integrate them with the districts, integrate them. So, and we are not talking about building a full new digital twins. We are talking about building on top of years of research of building information models, which are being used in every day by the architects, the authorities ask, the public procurement ask to be delivered, and they are becoming better. Of course, there's still challenges to work out. That's the role here. So I would bring a lot that, and maybe if I have time to one more, because I think it's a good example of the chain, a bit not on the energy efficiency, but recently one of the first projects of Horizon Europe, it's called Accord, and it's using all this data, all this research to build an open platform for building permits for smart contracts. It's an open ecosystem, it's demonstrating, there's many real projects there, because that another practical example where once the data pools are available, once the integrations are done, because there's all the interoperability, there's vendor lock, there's all that limits. So once it's done, it goes beyond the energy efficiency. It supports the materials, it supports the building permits in a much faster space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Isabel. So we heard about good projects and
using
innovative materials, but also using data. Gordon, you have the choice, data or materials. I mean, you presented an overview, but you can give us one or two examples as well.
Well, I think we still have time during the whole session to come back to various issues. I think I would like to answer, just to respond to both of you, but thank you very much for the comments. I would like to respond with some words of Ms. van der Rohe. Yes, it is, you know, that buildings represent the spirit of the epoch. Yes, and we have not yet arrived that every building is an eco construction. We haven't arrived at the eco, the green epoch for buildings, and still we are faced also with data problems and interoperability, and the fact that although for the buildings we have intelligent management systems which can actually make decisions based on demand response, that actually the triggering of the actual demand response is still being done manually, even though the intelligent system is saying, now's the time to switch off your chiller. This isn't done by the system itself, it's actually being done still by the building manager. And so we need to get along this pathway to arrive at the epoch of in environmental sustainable buildings. And I think both of the aspects of the bio-based materials and the data is certainly what's needed. So I'm going to just turn to the data as an example. And I think it's interesting, if anybody's interested in what can be done with big data. I won't focus on the demand response. I mentioned that as an example. But basically, if you want to look at for our big project, which is big with 2 Gs, and you can find it on Cordis, it's very easy. Cordis, big data, but with 2 Gs. And you will find lots of very interesting examples. And these projects have been running now for there's 3 of the projects. They're a family of projects. They've been running for 3 years. They are now delivering their results. And this particular project had multiple case studies, but was looking, I can give the example of the one in Catalonia, which is interesting, and unfortunately I can't say it's a specific building because it's a building stock with hundreds of buildings for the regional authority to look at how to make decisions regarding investments in its buildings based on all of this big data which is being collected. So they get an overview of their data, the performance of their buildings. It's not about the performance of a specific building accurately done with a model which is exactly this specific performance. It's the big data which is showing how the buildings overall perform, and they see the trends and they can make decisions based on this for their building stock. The same project has looked at another business case, because this is where we actually come to what's competitive and needing a business case for this, because we know that researchers and scientists, they are really interested in getting the data to work and the architectures and how you communicate and how you make ontologies of different buildings and you transfer them. So the researchers love this. But then you have to do something with it. Politicians, they really want to use the data for the change, and citizens want that change as well. But it's actually companies who are going to do it through business models. And what's been particularly interesting in all those years that I've worked on energy performance of buildings and building management systems, you still need gateways for the one to communicate with the other. The systems cannot all speak to each other, the different control systems in buildings. And actually, this big data project has managed by setting up different categorizations and ontologies of buildings and mapping them to allow that the regional authority can look at specific buildings and analyze how different parts of the system are communicating with each other, and then also operate the buildings more effectively because the whole system works as one. And that's overcoming what are proprietary barriers to the operation of buildings, because each manufacturer has its own black box of controls. But this system actually takes the data in a ontology form where it can put it through the whole architecture and deliver an outcome which is a decision which can be taken insight into the performance of the buildings, and then the investment decision can be made. So I think it's the business models round about the use of the data which is particularly important. And then, of course, the buildings as part of the energy system. And people then becoming also part of a living energy system, because it's not that the people are for the energy system, it's that the energy system is for the people who live in buildings, and we always have to keep this in mind. People come first.
People come first. And you said, I think you used the word people-centric as well. I think that's, we agree with this. And talking of people, behind projects there are people, and there is collaboration between people. You mentioned European projects, Gordon. I mean, they often involve more than 3 countries. I mean, there's collaboration also within the set plan. I wanted to know from you and also from the other panelists, if you can explain how collaboration is accelerating research and innovation. Why do we need to collaborate within Europe for that, either within the set plan or in the European projects? Perhaps you start, Gordon, because you mentioned there's hundreds of projects where there is collaboration.
In the first instance, collaboration is needed between countries. And this is particularly important. Each country has its own set of regulations, and so what we need is a lot of collaboration between the countries in order to bring their regulations closer together. This allows solutions to be applied in different regions and different countries. The collaborative process is also interesting, not just from the perspective of the research itself, where you have a team of researchers often collaborating with public authorities who are not familiar at all with with research, and our projects are actually looking at demonstration sites in real living conditions where they have to deal with legislation, they have to deal with finance, they need to deal with planning and procurement, which is done by a public authority, but meanwhile the researchers are doing research solutions. But just the third point on collaboration, which I would like to reflect on, we haven't mentioned this, is the collaboration along the value chain. And so I've mentioned the Built for People partnership. It's a partnership which is set up so the industry also brings the financing for research, and the European Commission gives the other part of the financing. And one of the main aims of this partnership is to set up local innovation clusters. This all sounds like a buzzword, but it's actually something that we conceptually started to work on in 2019 as a follow-up to the Energy Efficient Buildings Partnership. And basically this is looking at having in place the necessary provision of products and legislation, companies, demand, all in the one place where these clusters are working together along the value chain to deliver highly performant buildings. And I think this year was the first year that some of the contracts to become a Built for People innovation cluster were signed. We're not starting this from zero. We take clusters which are around Europe, and then they adopt both the principles of Built for People to look at this holistic perspective, and then additionally they are also working on the principles of the new European Bauhaus. So sustainability, inclusivity, and so they are taking this all on board within the clusters to bring that together. And it's nice to see that it starts to take shape. And the objective there is to accelerate the uptake of solutions from research and bring it to market, not in something which may normally be 15 years, but to reduce that time of getting a research solution into the market.
But if you want to react on clusters, Isabel, because that's also what you're trying to promote, or if you want to react on collaboration in general, I mean, how does collaboration accelerate research and innovation? What is your experience on that?
Yeah, well,
including in the set plan, if you can relate also the set plan.
Yeah, the set plan has or can have
Yeah.
let's leave it for the revamp, like a critical role. I'll say maybe before jumping immediately on the collaboration, because we were talking about just projects, let's refresh a bit. I know that the audience are all familiar with buildings, but just to give a bit of context, we have to see the needed collaboration in different levels when it comes to the buildings. So, as Gordon said, affordability of housing, we live there, we want comfortable, it's energy efficiency. So there is almost like the built environment is a public good, and the greening spaces, and there's also a very fragmented industry. I mean, this is, the buildings is not a big players industry like we would have Airbus in the aviation or the car industry, that there's a number of bigger players. So this is fragmented, local, but at the same time, the collaboration for me, especially at the research level, at the innovation, it is almost like compulsory to find common solutions, to find the technologies needed, to find the social dimension needed on innovation, the social innovation. Then it needs the place-based level collaboration. And that's also where the clusters comes. They bring all the value chain, it's true, but then they also cross different levels. So they link with a partnership to do the, let's say, European collaboration. I'm not going outside Europe now, because there's this public goods. There's these common goods, whatever they are, technologies, social innovation for the built environment, affordability solutions, material. They are common goods, not just because it's public, but also because from the business perspective, the companies need volumes. They will not sell just in one country. So there is this general level, and then there's the place-based innovation. And there, I think that the set plan, by its nature, can really have, I would say, almost a synergy role between these levels. There's the commission there, which can connect, so can create synergy to different instruments, clean energy transition, build for people, life, so the missions, the driving urban transition, so it can connect these synergies on the instrument level. It can connect also national, regional, the member states are there, so in particular the implementation working group 5 and the work that does, and it works a lot with the construction technology platform, so collaborating with the industry. So there is this, I think that the set plan can have a good role, and also on coherences of policies. So I would say that at least, maybe I don't want to raise the pressure, but also on the revamp, I would say that my expectation, the set plan have been having this role, but I would maybe raise that in the revamp. And now on building, especially the implementation working group, I can have this synergy role. Synergy between the public collaboration, synergies between the different instruments which are producing the collaborative research at European level, and then synergies with the member states, with the regions for place-based innovation, and the clusters are regional, and then they link precisely to work on all that. Am I going too long? I'm seeing the time, so sorry.
No, it's a mistake. Don't worry. Miguel, on collaboration. I mean, you're a regional research center, you said, but you're not acting only regionally, right? You collaborate with others.
Of course, yes. I mean, we are under climate emergency, so we need to be fast. We need to find solutions, and we need to implement solutions because the problem is here. So I think that alliance and collaboration is the only way to mitigate risk and to increase the speed of the solutions we need to provide to society. Also for companies, we have typically in the construction sector, medium and small companies, I think it's very useful, very interesting to be in consortium with universities and research and technology organizations, because it's the way these companies, they can have the knowledge and also to have access to the facilities of these organizations. So I think that is a very good opportunity, this kind of projects, that some companies get into the wheel of research, and once they start the first project, of course they will continue. And another thing that is very important is that because of the challenge we have we need a multi-technological approach. I mean, we need to combine different technologies, different solutions, and this is only possible from the collaboration. You cannot expect that you know everything, especially if you are a company. And just for example, if we want to decarbonize buildings, we need also to think about water. So,
absolutely.
In case of water, when you are thinking, we think about a new building or renovation, let's put experts on water, or for example, air quality. Air quality also is critical for... Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. So now I will repeat all, no. So for example, in the case of air quality, which affect the health of people, this also has a very strong link with energy efficiency. Yeah. So this multi-technological approach, I think that can be achieved on the basis of collaboration.
Well, thank you very much, Miguel. I mean, collaboration between the companies and research organizations is very important, also between different experts from different fields. I mean, you make the link to air quality, to water, which is becoming, I mean, water resilience is a topic that is also growing in terms of importance, and that's a very, very good point. Before we go on, just want to make sure that we take also a few questions from the audience, if there are any. We can't see you guys because you're in the dark. But if you wanted to ask a question, then just stand up, I guess is the easiest, then we will be able to see you. Either questions on what the panelists said or on the presentation that was made by Gordon, which is an overview of projects. Oh yeah, please. First row, second row.
Annette Kühn, Project Management, Jülich, Germany. I have a question on the large-scale harvesting of data you spoke about, Gordon. Who should do this harvesting? Do you have any central authority in mind, or what do you think about that? How to store this data and how to make it available to any stakeholders who might make use of it? Would be my question.
I think the mic's working, so thanks very much for the question. It's highly relevant. First of all, we could give an example from the big project, the big with double G. One of the pilot cases was with over 1 million energy performance certificates, which are available in the public database. And this information is then used, anonymized, and used as information, but it's then not publicly available. This is being done for decision-making processes, let's say by public authorities or regional authorities. Nevertheless, there is public information being released as well through the Building Stock Observatory of the European Commission. The one issue which I had just noted to say is we still haven't fully resolved all of the privacy issues around about the use of data, and that's still something which needs to be worked through in the whole process. But it's not that there's one central location. It would be that regionally important and relevant information would be available to the regional authorities to be used, and then also for business models, if there's an outsourcing of the energy management of a large number of buildings, this information from this large number of buildings would be available to the energy service companies, so the ESCO would have access to that information, and they would. Well, this is what would need to be seen because we've looked at it from a research perspective, but how would it actually work in practice? Who is the owner of the data? Who is protecting the data? And who is legally responsible for it is the next step. Yes, it's been looked at, but it still needs to be solved. I hope that answers your question.
Any other question from the audience? No, if not, we could address perhaps quickly the issue of how we can unlock the potential of innovative digital solutions or materials, new materials in the building sector. I mean, you've talked about the linking companies with research. I mean, how do we convert all these innovations into marketable solutions? I don't know whoever wants to respond on that. We heard a lot in previous sessions
Go
of
ahead.
great innovations, great research being done in many sectors, including in buildings. But when it comes to transferring that into the market, then we are a bit weaker.
Very fast, Vincent.
Yeah.
I think that it's very important to listen to the people, to listen to the customers, because people is asking for more sustainable things, sustainable products. So if we listen to what the people is asking, I think we will get very important information, and then we will be able, as companies or as research centers, to provide sustainable solutions. This, in addition to the regulations we have mentioned, just. And then also I think that ESG KPIs, ESG parameters that the European Union is promoting, it will help also a lot, because companies will receive investment only if they go for sustainable projects. So I believe that this will help a lot.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Isabel or Gordon. We've got 3 minutes left, so very quick answer.
I'll try to be quicker than that, but because I think Miguel focused in most of the aspects. I mean, the demand side needs to be there, and the demand side, there's in people, there's in the urgency, the need, but it needs also to be, so there's some depth of valley there after the applied research to bring to the market. And this goes more in particular to the materials, even because it's a fast pace when we go more to the digital business, but very to the materials. So the development of pilot infrastructures, test beds, together with Miguel touched it very good with the regulations, regulatory sandbox, testing, whatever you want to call, there's many buzzwords around, but it's absolutely critical because now there's that big valley. So we go up to the demonstrations, it's there, and particularly for new materials, and the people are asking, the people are asking for it, but it's not easy. There's no level playing fields for new materials to be pushed to the markets. There's standards to work on, there's demonstration, and it's precisely there, okay, we did a nice demonstration, even a house, but we need a pilot infrastructure to test. We need to open it to the companies to test it. At the same time, they test the regulations, call it a regulatory sandbox, but they need to go, they cannot be evaluate, okay, let's test it till we can, and now let's do a regulatory sandbox. They need to go in parallel. Pilot infrastructures, demonstrations, supports, because at the moment there's a lot of demonstrate is good, and then there's huge support, for example, startups onward. But there's one of the reasons we have invented a launch pad, and quite often our teams, they stay very long in the launch pad before a really launch, because they end up, they want to use the testing, they want to use the testing infrastructure till the last minute. And then, of course, I mean, I think we already talked here about the ecosystems. We have to stop to have these R&D ecosystems and business ecosystems. I mean, it has to be everyone at the table.
No demand side, citizens' needs. I mean, we've covered the main points. I think there's perhaps just to conclude, Gordon, and then Miguel and Isabel, a last sentence, and then we will close the session.
A last sentence, I would just pick up on what Isabel said, really, the regulatory sandboxes and getting the products onto the market. One project which is showing you can do deconstruction, you can manufacture new products from old materials, but workers will not want to work with them. Companies won't want to use them unless there's some form of a certification round about them. So a regulatory sandbox which allowed the value chain to be tested, and actually through Build for People, that's what we want to do, to get that sandbox working in the right conditions, to get the products faster onto the market, and be tested through a certified, qualified and certified product.
Miguel, thank you very much, Gordon. Miguel?
Yeah, I think that the solution we are looking for should be centric to the people, and also it will be the combination of different solutions. We need to make, as I said before, a multi-technological approach, and we need to combine different technologies, different solutions, and apply for each specific case.
Thank you. Isabel?
I'll not have the solutions part. I will maybe ask a change of mindset for everyone, and a message also for the other sectors. So we could also try to change our speech. and stop seeing the building sector as a problem, but as a potential. Let's start seeing a more can-do attitude. Yes, there's a huge potential. We don't always need to say that we are huge consumers. There is potential for the buildings to have a big role in the flexibility of the energy system. There's a potential for the buildings even to be suppliers of critical raw materials when we have a renovation wave coming and critical raw materials missing. So let's bring it up and let's maybe start sitting at the same table and not just, oh, we have a problem we need to solve, because I think we are also, the buildings are part of the solution.
I like that, seeing the buildings not as a problem but as a solution, and that links to what you were saying initially, that it's a solution as well for ensuring flexibility in the energy system and increasing the share of renewables. So, and for that we need digitization. That's a subject that we've addressed. We need to use data. We've heard about excellent projects in this area, but at the same time we need to take care of privacy issues and other legal issues, and that's important. We talked a lot about circularity, and we heard about some projects using innovative materials. Circularity is a topic that will be taking more and more importance, and I'm glad that there were so many people in the previous brainstorming sessions discussing circularity principles. Consumer-centric, or you put it people-centric, citizens, I mean, I think that means taking societal needs into account, taking consumers' opinion into account at an early stage in the process, not at the end, but at the beginning. We've discussed a little bit about market transfer. I mean, how do we make sure that our great innovations enter the market, and how can we create competitive industry, and how can we make a business case out of it? That was your word, Gordon. And Isabel, you rightly pointed as well to the importance of creating synergies between programs, between initiatives, and actually all these words, I mean, fit quite well with the revision of the set plan. So I encourage you to read the communication on the revision of the set plan, where we want to create these task forces looking at all these aspects in more detail across the different implementation working group of the set plan. So I think I'm glad that this is the results of our discussion also fit well with the revision, and I'm looking forward actually to working with you and with you in the audience on this new set plan, which will hopefully bring a lot of benefits we've been discussing. So I'd like to finish by thanking you for your attention, but the speakers first and foremost for their excellent interventions, and the Spanish presidency for the organization of that wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
the last of the parallel sessions we're going to have in the 17th Set Plan Conference, and we're going to address offshore, floating wind, and ocean energy technologies. My name is Evangelis Zimas, and I will be the moderator today. I'm the head of the Energy Transition Insights for Policy Unit at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and I have with me a distinguished panel of experts that I will introduce you immediately after my introduction, where we're going to discuss this very important subject. But I would like, before we start with our dialogue with our experts today, to remind you what is the purpose, why we're here today. And we're here to address the current status, the bottlenecks, and the solutions that we needed to bring floating offshore wind and ocean energy technologies into the market. And this session is very timely. The European Union has set as a priority to scale up and accelerate the deployment of these technologies. And in order to do that, this comes immediately after the publication of two important pieces of documents that we produced in the European Commission. This year's communication promoting the offshore renewable potential, and also the Wind Energy Action Plan. Now, the importance of offshore renewables for the energy transition cannot be overstated. The potential for offshore renewables is huge. And so far, we have only the bottom-fixed offshore wind energy as a commercialized technology. However, this huge potential will be harvested by additional technologies, the floating wind and also the ocean energy technologies. And we need to make sure that these technologies are developed, becomes mature, and deployed in order that we allow them to play their role in the energy transition. And I say that the potential is huge, and I'm very confident about it, because in the JRC we have done an analysis about the offshore renewable energy potential, and indeed the numbers are very, very large. That is sufficient to help us go into the energy transition. And for those of you who are interested, I invite you to look into our Energy and Industry Geography Lab. That is an online information platform where you will see the renewable energy potential at a very high level of resolution in the European Union. Now, let's see what lies ahead. Collectively, we have set ambitious targets about offshore renewable capacity. By 2030, we would like to install around 60 gigawatt of offshore wind, and we have an ambitious target of 300 gigawatt for 2050. And if I look into ocean energy technologies, we aim for 1 gigawatt in 2030 and 40 in 2050. So it is very important that we realize this potential in order to achieve our climate neutrality. In Europe, we have made significant progress. We are global leaders in these technologies, but it's clear that more work needs to be done. And if you would like to learn more about the status and the prospects of these technologies, I invite you also to look into the Clean Energy Technology Observatory reports, where the JRC is producing in support of the Competitiveness Progress Report every year on both ocean and wind energy technologies. Now, we needed to come up with the proper recipe to be able to roll out these technologies. And we, at the Commission, we provide the right political signals. As I mentioned to you before, only a couple of weeks ago, we published the communication on offshore renewable energy, where we provide a number of solutions on how we can accelerate the deployment of renewables offshore. And also, as I mentioned, we have the Wind Power Action Plan. I would like to complement these measures with an article that is in the revised Renewable Energy Directive, which provides an indicative target of 5% of new installations by 2030 from innovative renewable technologies, which of course includes floating wind and of course ocean technologies. So our challenge that we're going to discuss here today is how we can turn this ambition into a reality, how to commercialize both the floating wind and ocean energy technologies. And with the panel today, we're going to discuss the challenges and the solutions. So actually, in the order that from my left and going further, I have Lotta Pirtima. Lotta is a senior policy officer at Ocean Energy Europe. Lotta coordinates the ETIP Ocean Energy and is a co-author of a joint report between IRENA and Ocean Energy Europe on investment in ocean energy technologies. So welcome Lotta. Then we have Lisette Ramirez. Lisette is a senior analyst for offshore wind at Wind Europe. She monitors policy and technology developments across Europe, and she coordinates the largest group of industry experts in floating wind. So, welcome, Lisette. Further down, we have Jacob Edmonds, who is the head of innovation at Ørsted, the world's largest offshore wind developer. Jacob develops new business opportunities, such as floating offshore wind, and also innovations in operations. And last but not least, we have with us Ignacio Martí. Ignacio is the head of division for wind energy materials and components at the DTU Wind and Energy Systems in Denmark. He is the coordinator of the EERA Joint Program of Wind and vice chair of ETIP Wind. In his role as the coordinator of EERA Joint Program Wind, he leads the largest European network of organizations dedicated to wind energy research. So, we have, as you can see, a distinguished panel of real experts where we're going to discuss initially what are the challenges, and then, as I said, try to find solutions, and then we will open the floor I will open the floor for questions, so you can address also yourself our experts. And I would like to start with you, Jacob. So, what is, to your view, the main challenges in the offshore renewable energy sector today?
First of all, let me start by saying thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for the presidency of the conference and presidency of EU to have us here in this stage. Being the largest or representative from the largest offshore wind developer, what is interesting is that our journey is actually not that old. We started our journey back some 20 years ago or so. And I normally tend to say that the situation is that if we look at offshore wind, it is basically a technology that is in its teenage years. Mm-hmm. And I remember myself in my teenage years, and I was not very, good at making decisions, and I probably didn't know enough about the world in that sense. But what it also meant is that it's still a maturation journey that we're on in this sense. When you then add the complexity of basically floating into this, so saying we've moved away from fixed bottom, where we have had significant gains, but only, as I said, within the last 5 or 6 years in that sense. And all of a sudden introducing something completely new into this thing. Because anybody who will suggest that floating is just an add-on to fixed bottom is mistaking in many ways, because there are so many differences in between this. And what we're experiencing is very much taken from sort of the innovation journey of any new technology, which is that it's a great idea. Everybody can see the potential. Everybody can see that there's a need. But at the same time, how do you make it viable? How do you make sure that there's actually economies in this, and that you introduce basically economies of scale, which is the key sort of element into all of this. So Lotte will also talk about the concept of the valley of death. Some of you who are innovators or have read innovation sort of theories will know about this, which is basically that period for when you've spotted a good idea, you've demonstrated the technology, but now you're fighting to make it commercially viable. And that is exactly where we are right now with floating. And it is interesting to see, how we will emerge on the other side from this.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Let me turn to Lotta. Lotta is our representative in the panel of the ocean energy technologies. So, can you answer the same question about the challenges now looking into wave and tidal energy technologies?
Well, there are no challenges. You give us money, we give you projects. But actually, wave and tidal are exactly at that point now where we are demonstrating devices in real sea conditions in the case of wave, and have pilot farms of several devices already generating power since 2016 in tidal. So that's exactly that moment what Jacob was describing, where we need to bridge the gap from innovation to market. Mm-hmm. And there, the challenge, if that's how we want to call it, is the shortage of those financial mechanisms that would allow these technologies to do that. So attracting private capital to the sector. So to explain that, even early stage pilot farms will need private investment, because a single grant, public grant, for example, from Horizon Europe cannot cover all the costs of a pilot farm because the investment need is higher. So we need that mix of equity, debt, and public grants to get to financial close. But let's say I'm a title developer. I go to a bank with my pilot farm project and I ask for a loan. Well, they might give it to me, but at such a high interest rate that if we were to finance a pilot farm with private capital only, about 50% of the kilowatt hour price would go to financing costs. So adding in those financing mechanisms will reduce the amount of money that needs to be sourced in the private sector, and also reducing the financing costs so that we can actually put the money into technology development and not the financing costs. And then another point in that is that private investors will want to have returns. So in order to do that, we need revenue support that would give a top-up on the electricity price that at the moment for this innovative technology is not enough to ensure those returns. And that's exactly how wind and solar were brought to market as well, with feed-in tariffs. And this is how we can bring to market this technology that is domestic. It replaces gas because it's predictable and it works at different times, complementing other renewables. And it's led by European companies, so really bringing in that European value.
Thank you very much, Lotta. Very clear. Lisette?
Thank you very much, Vangelis. I'm ready to shoot on the challenges. I think all technologies have challenges, but it's also true that offshore wind is a beautiful technology. It has allowed us to bring some of the best capacity factors from variable renewables into our system, so we need them. And I think this message is clear. So where are the main challenges? Well, setting a bit the scene, let's remember that today we have of offshore wind, all offshore wind, 32 gigawatts installed across Europe. Okay, this is 32,000 megawatts. From this, 210, this is less than 1%. It's floating. And it's actually mostly out of the EU. So it's mostly in Norway and the UK at the moment. But with this amount of floating offshore wind, Europe is the leader in the technology at the moment in the world. And this is crucial because we want to remain the leader. But it's also true that floating wind has been here for a while. Maybe I disagree a bit with Jacob because floating offshore wind has been here for about 15 years, demonstrating this technology. When I said that countries understand the importance of it, it's because now, at the moment, if we look at the 2030 targets, in Europe, countries want to do more than 10 gigawatts of floating offshore wind by the end of this decade. That's a big scale up from 210 megawatts to more than 10 gigawatts. So how much of this is going to materialize and by when? So to me, the main challenge at the moment is that there is a big mismatch between these targets and their actual execution. But this is coming from three main, let's say, factors. The first one is that most of the countries that need floating wind are newcomers in offshore wind. So they don't have an existing framework. Let's see, for example, Portugal, Spain. They all want to run their auctions, but they don't even have an existing framework for offshore. So they have to kind of start from scratch. The second is, because of this, then auctions, they are not happening. We don't have yet the developers having their projects in their hands to take them through the permitting phase, all of the grid, the design, etc. So things are not really moving in with the rest of the actors. And finally, because of the same, then we have not yet established a supply chain, which is slightly different in some components than the one we use for bottom fix. So these three factors together, at the moment, are, from my point of view, limiting the development of floating.
Thank you, Lisette. Very clear, very good points. Ignacio, you will close the first round of questions. So what is your take on this question, on the main challenges?
Thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. I hope you can hear me properly. And I would like maybe to come back a little bit to, you could say, back to basics on wind energy, right? So, and following a little bit on the previous speakers and Liz said. So today we see a lot of, and you have reminded us on the big targets ahead, right? So, and wind energy is playing, and is expected to play a huge role, both onshore, offshore, floating, no matter how we want to look at this, right? So the challenge ahead and the scale is really big. And sometimes I have heard, so somehow wind energy is a mature technology, why should we keep investing in developing it and doing R&D and so on, right? That's not true. And somehow it's also is a big risk. At the moment, we are in a situation where we could easily lose part of our industrial footprint in Europe in the next years related to wind energy. We could find ourselves in the situation where PV was after all the industry was wiped out from Europe. This could happen easily in Europe as well. So my point here is mainly a wake up a little bit call. It's a stress call, you could say, from the sector. Yes, our technology is fantastic, has been delivering, but with these big challenges that we have ahead in deployment, in manufacturing, in sustainability, and so on, the status quo is not enough. We need to do much more, right? And this is for all wind energy. This is for onshore, for offshore, for floating wind, of course, there are specific things. And let me come back a little bit. So what can we do here? What is the step up that we need to do? Recently, we are still working on this from ETIP Wind in collaboration with the Research Alliance. We have developed the Strategic Research Innovation Agenda that is going to be presented in the beginning of December, where we have identified 5 research and innovation pillars to address these challenges ahead, right? And let me tell you what are these pillars, which are, again, for all wind energy. The first one is wind energy system integration. And we have heard during today and yesterday also, the system itself is changing a lot. So it's not the system we are used to, right? So we're looking forward, it's going to be a completely new system with new requirements. The second pillar is on the industrialization, scaling up, and competitiveness, which is addressing precisely this challenge of how to deploy and manufacture very quickly and at the speed that is needed. The third pillar is operation and maintenance and digitalization, which is also raising the need for going beyond what we do today, which is also connected to the number of units that are going to be there offshore that will have to be serviced and so on. We can do much more, much better there. The fourth pillar is sustainability and circularity, because as we know, we are moving towards the net zero path, and this, with today's technologies, we cannot do it. So we need to introduce innovation research as we go. And the fifth and the last one is skills and coexistence, which is crucial. Without proper trained skill, job, and human labor, we will not be able to get there, and coexistence is also very important because we are going to deploy a lot. So this also to give a sense of the amount of effort that it will take. The total amount, and this is a bottom-up approach, estimating how many projects, what kind of projects we need to address these 5 pillars. We are talking about 1.8 billion euros for the 3-year period coming. And this is a significant ramp-up compared to the previous research innovation agendas. And it's not coming out of the blue, it's just to match the challenges and the statements. We want the statements to be not just a PowerPoint or political statement. We want it to happen. And there is a risk if we don't really do what we need. It could be just a nice thing, but not realize. So this is a call for not to continue as we have been doing in the last years, in general, for wind energy. I will come back to floating a little bit later.
Super. So I will not try to summarize the challenges, we have discussed them, but it is very clear also for our audience to understand that floating wind and ocean technologies are not TRL-9 technologies. They require some special treatment because they are now ramping up. So we need research and innovation, we need demonstration, and and also the necessary measures that these projects can go to deployment. So now let's try to be more specific about potential solutions on what we can do about them. So let me start again with you, Jacob. So how do you believe that we can accelerate the scale up of floating wind? to meet the EU goals, and then to deploy all this capacity that we have put here on paper?
Yes. So I will first of all acknowledge that I think Lisette has a great point in saying that there's something about the lack of auctions. There's something about the, you could say, the slow permitting regime and these sorts of things. But just for now, I'll let that rest and sort of try to save some of these amazing colleagues that are working all over Europe, trying to be part of the green transition as well, and doing the utmost of what they have available to them. So instead, I'll focus on two other things that I believe are sort of the road to success in this, if you could say. Number one is basically design for industrialization. I think this is one of the key elements that you find that especially innovators are struggling with. You get so caught up in basically ensuring that your design has the right technical capabilities. You de-risk the component itself. You want to prove that it actually can survive and it exists and sort of is a viable solution. That you forget to think about how should this be mass produced? How should this be manufactured at a larger scale in this sense? Sorry about the microphone here, but I think it should be okay on this one, but it keeps dropping down a little bit. But we stopped counting in Ørsted when we reached the 100th different sort of technology, floater technology design, after going out and visiting some of these early stage developers of new technology in this. We are not a technology owner in our company. We are agnostic to technology. So it's extremely important that we have the finger on the pulse to understand which technology is going to come up. But just the floater alone, we ended up, as I said, we stopped counting after we reached 100 different concepts that we saw. Obviously, how are you going to take that forward is going to be a battle of who wins. So there is one element there that comes into play, and as I said, one of them will be who has actually designed, maybe not the optimal design, but the optimal design in relation to basically mass fabrication and sort of mass production in this. So that's also why I think that under this headline, it's extremely important that we stop funding more demonstrators. We stop doing more of sort of exploring what I would also sometimes call sort of localization or national interests in designs and these types of things, and then focus on basically coming together. Similar to what Europe initially and the European Union was all about in the beginning, which was to save an industry or to sort of drive an industry in that sense. So for me, designing for industrialization is probably the number one key. Things that you can do here is, of course, that from a market perspective, and I'm part of the market in that sense, we can come together and talk about which of these designs do we believe in the most. We've got great support from the ETIPs. We've got great support from the systems that we're part of in Europe to make those conversations. So there are actually legit conversations and not something happening behind closed doors that will mirror, cartel business or anything like this. So I'm suggesting to do this fully open-eyed and sort of in that sense, but use the collaboration and the third-party element into saying that this is one way for us to decide on which should be the dominant sort of provider within, as I said, the floater, but we could also talk about dynamic cables and other elements that are coming into this. Secondly, we can also, in that conversation, talk about how do we fill the order books with the people that are actually supposed to produce and fabricate all of this. So they get some visibility into this, because imagine that they're going to an investment decision meeting in their company saying, Mr. Chairman of the board, would you like to spend enormous sums of money to change over the factory shop floor from what it used to do to something completely new in all of this? That needs to be driven by basically an outlook and a visibility for something in the future. So that's number one. The second thing I want to talk about is building a robust supply chain. If the supply chain is there, the demand will be matched. That's basically what it is in that sense. We are, as I said, we are bound in Europe by, for instance, the legislation on sort of free tendering rules and laws, and I'm not suggesting whether we go away from this, but I'm suggesting that we start to think about how we can utilize the collective Europe to become part of the solution, rather than every single member state country sort of working on their own to say, I want to have the floater factory, or I want the dynamic cable factory, etc., etc. Because what we need to acknowledge is that if we build the industry and take it to the levels that Ignacio was also talking about, which is required, then there will be enough funds for the entire EU to basically leverage, the benefits from all of this. So those are my two sort of pain points in this and sort of solution points in this is, as I said, design for industrialization and building a robust supply chain.
Okay, very clear. Now, Lotta, if I turn to you, how we can improve policies and regulation to boost the growth of ocean energy technology in the EU?
Sure. So I would highlight four key areas. So first of all, giving political signals, showing visibility of the market is really crucial to attract private capital. So a good measure is setting national deployment targets for wave or tidal technologies, depending on the resource that a country has domestically. So, for example, through the national energy and climate plans.
Exactly.
And Spain, for example, has done this, and this will give them a huge advantage when wave developers, because that's what the resource is in wave in Spain, when wave developers and private investors are looking into potential markets, because it shows that there will be a market for that technology. So that's really important. A second way to show that market visibility, as I mentioned earlier, is that revenue support. Again, to make project bankable and bring in that private capital. So the UK, although not in the EU anymore, but they have given feed-in tariffs, so contract for difference for tidal projects. And we have a big pipeline of projects to be deployed in the next few years in the UK, and also EU companies who want that. So,
Exactly.
And France as well has given a feed-in tariff and a grant for their first pilot tidal farm that will be deployed. So this is really key, and this is how we can, start to scale up this technology. Then, as I mentioned already, the financing mechanism. So maybe to give a few more concrete ideas of what that could look like. For example, continuing the mid-size window of the Innovation Fund that this year actually financed 2 wave projects already. Perhaps setting up an insurance and guarantee fund that would take on some of that risk.
Yes.
Or maybe improving access to EIB programs or investments, because these technologies are still a bit too, let's say, too innovative for the EIB finance. Then finally, in the regulatory side, streamlining permitting processes so that it doesn't take 5 or more years. We're not as long as in the wind industry, that could be even longer, but still it's a long time to apply for a permit. So as the Commission has put in place or proposed measures through the Renewable Energy Directive, setting up one-stop shops, go-to areas for renewables, also reducing the time limit for permitting and ensuring that regulators have the resources and skills to process those increased numbers of applications. That's really important. So these are, let's say, the key elements that will help us scale up ocean energy and keep the leadership that we have in the EU and Europe at the moment, because the US and China have started to pour money into wave and tidal, and they're not joking. If we don't do this now, they will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Lotta. You mentioned permitting. We try. Even the wind action plan, the communication, in the REPowerEU, we put permitting everywhere. So eventually, we will be able to accelerate not only for ocean, for all the renewable energy technology. So this is a kind of a cross-cutting issue. Yes. Lisette, I will come to you now. Looking now into floating wind, how we can improve policies and regulations to make sure that they happen, because it's a huge potential. We can go much deeper. And as you said, we can go to countries that cannot benefit from shallow water or smooth beds. And we can go to the Atlantic, we can go to the Mediterranean, we can go farther to help also alleviate any issues about public acceptance. What can we do?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to elaborate, and I will look more into definitely the regulatory part. I fully endorse Jacob's answer. I also feel at the moment perhaps floating is not making the best of the steps that offshore wind bottom fixed did. There were not that many options when, let's say, most of the market went to monopiles, to give a quick answer there. But I think looking quickly at offshore wind, why was it a success? There was a very good collaboration, one of the most successful, between the research and innovation and government setting auctions. And so it was brilliant because the research, they were shedding the light into all of those hard questions. If there was any technical challenge, they will find a solution, right? So they were really looking into how do we push the whole sector. And together, governments then trust them by allowing these technology-specific auctions. We started with small, let's say, capacity, maybe 200 megawatt projects. They moved to 500 megawatt projects. The current size of an average auction is about 1 gigawatt of a wind farm. We are not there yet on floating. So I'll leave the R&I side because I'm sure we'll get more insights, but on auctions then, our main way to accelerate floating is to translate these targets into clear auctions. I'm going to say the word a lot of times, sorry, but why are auctions so crucial? Because they allow to have a clear visibility that will move the rest of the supply chain. Now, this means not only saying we want 10 gigawatts by 2030 or whatever is the number. It means you need to have a timeline. When are you auctioning? How much capacity? Are you providing any support, etc.? So there has to be really a timeline. Now, also the governments need to ensure through the maritime special plans that some of the areas are in deep waters. I cannot say we're going to have floating auctions and all of my areas are in shallow waters. You have to allow both of them. Otherwise, the technology is not going to fly. And I think a very crucial point, which we see now, perhaps, we know that the targets are non-binding, right? So we rely on a lot of trust. But I think it's crucial that we ask both the government and the industry to respect the timelines of these auctions, because I think we've heard from several countries that auctions will be going to happen for the past 2 years. There have been delays because of different things, like I gave the example, some of them don't have a regulation, so I understand this can take time, but if there is a timeline and there are deadlines and everyone really tries their best, that will be the best for the whole sector. Now, just to say in more detail then, how do we make a good auction? Because, we want to know the elements. And the first and most important message is we don't want to reinvent the wheel, okay? We want to build on all of the good lessons from offshore wind, bottom fix. And I might repeat some of Lota's points because they have to be repeated. So, of course, technology-specific auction, this means that for the time being, we need floating to really compete with either just floating or technologies that are in the same tier of level of cost. Yes. This is only going to come down after several large projects are out in the water. So, technology-specific auctions. Then, if possible, just because it's much more efficient, the government should carry this centrally. This means that the government decides the sites, they decide the rules, etc. If you let the developers select the areas and come to you, and that can also work. But we've seen, and this was probably first set by the Netherlands and Germany, when they decided to take more of the parts of the development, the early development of sites, things went super quickly. So the central auctions is the best way for a country to deliver their targets. We also see the need at the moment, of course, to have a revenue stabilization mechanism. And the contract for difference has worked wonders. It started in the UK, and actually, to say that the contract for difference itself is the evolution of many other types of supports that came before. And actually, a CFD is not a support, because when it's a two-sided, also the government is getting money back. So it is really just a way that the developer can prove to the bank that they will be able to cover that loan. And because these technologies are very intensive in terms of capital cost, so this will help them to get a better access to funding. And finally, I would like to add one that maybe is not so usually repeated, but now we see also a lot of announcements. This company is going to do a 2 gigawatt floating project here, this company, and if I tell you the pipeline at the moment in terms of projects that people say they're going to materialize, is more than 100 gigawatts.
Wow.
Is this going to happen? I'm not sure. So what we need, and it's crucial also for these auctions to go the right way, is a strong pre-qualification. Because by setting good pre-qualification requirements, you are already setting the bar high. And then you will only accept serious bidders, those developers who are willing to really take a technology and a project from beginning to end. It's not seen as an, let's say, business opportunity. It's more seen as we really want to take this project, commercialize, optimize the design, go through all of the permits. That takes time. And not everyone has that experience, unfortunately. So it's very important to set the pre-qualification. And my last point, so when I told you challenges, my third was supply chain.
Yes.
And of course, the point that you made, Jacob, I think it would be ideal for me to sit developers and ask them which are the concepts that we should actually industrialize, right? But that's not our role. So the way we see it at Wind Europe is that it is possible to reward projects that have in their plans early investments in the supply chain. So of course, if you say, look, I'm this company, I'm willing to do this 500 megawatt project. In fact, I already plan to invest 100 million in this port. That already is giving signals of where the next clusters and the industrialization is going to happen. So these contractual agreements are very important for both the supply chain, but also the regions, so that they really see the signs and the commitment of the sector. So.
Thank you very much, Lisette. I'm keeping notes here of all your points, and I'm trying actually to integrate. So I put here pre-qualified and centralized technology-specific auctions. I think that this captures many of your points together with the CFD. Ignacio, you started talking about R&D.
Yep.
It is clear to all of us that these technologies, we need to help them go along the TRL ladder. So the question is, what is and you started talking about the priorities for R&D. What exactly we can do in order to make sure that floating offshore wind can go relatively quickly to TRLs that will allow demonstration and eventual commercialization?
Yeah. I think the key word quickly that you mentioned there, I will try to build on that, right? So one of, there are a number of things, of course, and I will come back to these research innovation pillars, which have specific elements for floating wind. But one of the things, of course, is we want to see floating wind farms deployed sooner than later, because actually there is no time to waste, right? Coming back to these ambitious targets. One of the things, of course, it is how do we speed up all this learning process so we can really bring new solutions to the market, so knowledge to product as quickly as possible. And I think it is part of this is also how do we set up the learning process from the demonstrators, hopefully the coming wind farms, floating wind farms, with the research community and the key stakeholders, right? That's why to try to address this and work in a better way in the Research Alliance, we are proposing to move into the creation of this European Center of Excellence as a platform, not only for floating wind, but for all wind technologies, to create this kind of framework where we can address in a quicker, more effective way, whatever challenges appear. Also because new challenges will come as we go, right? It's not a static picture. Having said that, Coming to the maybe more specific areas. So if you remember these 5 pillars I mentioned before, the first one is wind energy system integration. Of course, for floating wind, it also means that we need to be able to connect the energy. And there are specific things about the modeling of the future energy system and what is the role of these floating wind farms with grid capacities that we need to deliver, grid services, and floating wind is special. So we need to understand also what are the specific conditions for floating wind farms there in that context, right? Co-location, hybrid power plants, also with the production of hydrogen and so on. What does it mean when it's a floating environment? We need to address those particular challenges, right? Coming to the industrialization and scaling up, which is crucial, completely agree with Jacob here. So we need to focus more and more design for mass manufacturing automation as well. Yes. And you could say also, I mean, there have been a number of projects of focusing on floating wind at European level, supported by the European Union, but also at national level. Is it solved? No, it's not. There's a number of elements. The target is moving, but actually because we are moving to the industrialization, we need to really be able to industrialize, right? So then also the optimization of the installation methods. We need to get better, quicker, right? So it really flows. And also incorporating the repair methods without the need to tow back to shore. How to substitute components. So this is part of the industrialization journey, that it has to be also easy to deploy, but also to operate. Focusing on the third pillar, operation and maintenance and digitalization. Well, we need to optimize the full life cycle, right? So challenges like, can we design a floating foundation that will last for 50 years? Maybe we replace the wind turbine, or maybe we replace some different components. But what about the floater as well? Can we optimize that part? We need to understand also how it's going to be the life of that structure. How do we get the benefits of the potential of the floating wind in terms of wind farm control, which is connected to the grid services? We have new degrees of freedom, right? It's moving, but that could be an advantage that we can play with if we know how to do that, which could be the basis for even more degrees of freedom to operate and really take the best out of the energy and the conditions and the wind conditions, right? Autonomous operation and maintenance, crucial, also for floating wind, which is specific. There are different needs compared to the bottom fix, right? So we need to move also on the automation of operation and maintenance. And then when we move into the sustainability and circularity, it's kind of common also. New materials, but we have mooring lines, we have dynamic cables, we have specific components that also need to be assessed from a sustainability point of view, as the rest of the wind energy will have to do as well, right? And areas which are common with bottom fix offshore wind. So how do we promote biodiversity? How do we have nature positive strategies so we improve, not just reduce the impact, but actually improve the ecosystems and biodiversity around that? And again, floating wind have specific conditions that all the technologies don't have. We need to understand that in particular, right? Lifetime extension, how these floating structures are going to behave when they are there after 20 years, 25 years. Will it make sense to extend the life? How? What are the specific areas that we need to address there? Overall design for sustainability. And finally, this last pillar, skills and coexistence. We need to bring workers from oil and gas and other sectors to operate to install our plants, floating wind, to operate them, and actually minimize, of course, but we need to train our workers, specifically education is needed, and the coexistence. Maritime spatial planning has been mentioned before, and research is actually needed in that space a lot, because we need to understand what are the implications when you go for deployment, what are all the implications around. So those are some of the areas. So there's plenty of work to do. That's also maybe the summary, right?
But we're also in the set plan. The set plan aims to promote this joint research, and we have the implementation working groups. We'll come to this. We had foreseen some time for questions, but the lively discussion does not allow for this. And we have to stop the session immediately on time because we have to close the conference. I see here that we can allow maximum one question from the floor. I have seen one hand. I'm sorry for this. So, yes? Please. And if you can please also state your name and your affiliation.
Christian Patrick from Environment Europe. I just wanted to emphasize or support what has been said on the technology-specific auctions and CFD schemes, not only for the technologies we have heard here, but also for any other innovative renewable energy technology. Well, I'm coming from the airborne wind sector, so we would need this as well. And I think all the technologies that would fit under the 5% target to be reached by 2030 would require that. So instead of coming up with technology neutral schemes, let's use the ones that have worked in the past and that where we have good experience and apply them for all these technologies that require to ramp up basically over the next few years. And this is floating, tidal, wave, airborne, whatever. So I really hope that member states and the Commission see that, and just there's no need to reinvent the wheel, as Lisette also said. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's a very good point. Allow me therefore to go to, we are in the set plan conference, so the question is how the set plan can help the floating offshore wind and ocean energy technologies achieve their vision, meet the targets. So I will give you 1 minute each, if you can just convey to all of us what is your message to the set plan community.
So maybe if I...
Let's start, no, but let's start that way. So
That's
yeah, Ignacio?
Okay, fine. I think the set plan, of course, it has had an enormous impact looking backwards, and it can have and should have this same level of impact looking forward. What I think it's needed now is to move from individual goals, specific projects into a program, a more stable, quicker, more efficient way of working, and having the visibility and vision about what is coming also in terms of research, development, demonstration as a pack would be enormous, the impact of that. And then coming back to my suggestion from the research community, can we move forward to a little bit more stable framework, center of excellence that will enable this kind of permanent discussion and evaluation? Are we making progress? Is it enough? Should we focus elsewhere?
Yes.
We need to have this dialogue in an efficient way. So I think the set plan is the ideal place to really develop this.
Excellent. Very good points. Jacob?
Yeah, I think first of all, and we saw that with the wind power package that came out as well, that all of the challenges that we've also talked about in the panel today are well received by the European Commission and also by the European Union in general. So I think the set plan role is basically to ensure that it gets implemented into the member states. So I think that is the crucial element, is saying we know the recipe, to Christian's point from before, we've seen it before, some of these elements. My company is a success story because of this, that was set up in that way. So we've seen the recipe, we know what it takes, we've identified it, we've spelled it out, and in a commission-driven sort of package in this sense. And now I think the set plan role is basically to empower and sort of bring together the member states on this sort of topic in that sense.
Super. Lisette?
Yes, thank you. First, I would like to, I'm very grateful, the sector is very grateful for all of the previous efforts on the set plan. We acknowledge that all of the previous Horizon Europe and other funds have really prioritized floating offshore wind, and that has allowed us to test the technology, and now it's proven. So now what we want you to focus on is on calls, that the future calls will bring the scale up and the mass manufacturing as the main priority for floating. So if it's not particularly on floating, in general, I would say what we want is, if there will be demonstration of technologies, something innovative, it is something that should bring the knowledge to the whole sector. So that is not only looking at a specific design, but that is really pushing the whole sector. For offshore wind, it can be, O&M was discussed, for instance, but that pushed the whole sector to improve the efficiency. So
Very good.
that would be it.
And Lotta?
Yes, first I would say that really continuing, recognizing the role of ETIPS and continuing their work, supporting, the Commission is supporting the ETIPS work at the moment, and I think this allows us to have that independent and technically informed nature that, you know, without this public funding could be lost, because not all ETIPS can continue working. So I think that's, and we've heard that already in yesterday's session, that the importance of the work that ETIPS are really doing. And second, a bit what was echoing what was said before, ensuring that the set plan implementation plans are aligned with then national research and innovation strategies or policies, so that there's more collaboration between the set plan actors, but also actors between who are in the set plan and outside of the set plan, so that the discussions that happen there flow through the different ministries at national level to where discussions about Horizon Europe or national energy and climate plans are taking place.
And thank you very much, Lotta. And of course, the revised plan that also aims to bring even the steering group at a much higher level, because then the members of the steering group will be nominated by the government. That means that there's going to be a more direct link between the set plan operations and the national governments and vice versa. And all this is going to create, to my view, a more conductive ecosystem where messages can come across. Time is of the essence, so I will try to... you want to add something?
I have a last comment, sorry.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Because you said in the beginning that there is the target of 5% innovation, and I was quickly doing the math, so that would be 3 gigawatts by 2030, considering the target of at least 60 gigawatts. So my message was that I think, listening to all of the panel and also the audience, I think that falls very short on what Europe can deliver. So I would encourage to not limit ourselves with that 5%.
But maybe we can use the 5% as a seed that we can kickstart these technologies
For
and
sure.
then gradually move
Should
to
be the
using...
bare minimum.
Oh, okay.
That's my message.
Very good. Point taken. So, first of all, I have to wrap it here because we have to go to the closing session. So I would like to thank all of you for this very rich and constructive discussion we have. And of course, I would like to thank our audience for listening to us, and I hope that you also found the discussion useful. It is challenging for me to try to wrap up, but I have pointed here 4 points, but of course there are many more. Clearly, we need to streamline and harmonize the regulatory framework. We need spatial planning. Spatial planning, I'm sorry. We needed to go to this centralized, technology-specific, pre-selected auctions. And of course, we need to find the right financing and funding mechanisms to support these high-risk and low TRL technologies. And you have said that over and over again. We know the recipe. We have been there before as Europe for other technologies. Let us not try to discover the wheel. Use these instruments again for these technologies to make sure that floating offshore wind and ocean energies will happen. We discussed a lot about industrialization, scaling up, standardization, also converging to a limited or to focus our efforts on selective design. So this is going to help the sector advance further. Permitting, it is a recurring thing, but I hope that we gradually improve. It is a collective objective that we speed up permitting, of course, with full respect on the environment and any other concerns, and also enabling the large-scale deployment of all these technologies. And the last point is that to strengthen the supply chains. And I think that here the Net Zero Industry Act comes. Offshore renewables is one of the pre-identified clean energy technologies eligible in Annex 1. And also you remember that there are specific provisions for projects that can boost the manufacturing. And you called for optimization of manufacturing of this technology. So hopefully, this NZIA will trigger private investors and the national governments to come up with this manufacturing. And of course, skills. We need to educate our people. We need to bring the human skills, and we have to give the right competencies that they can help us develop and deploy these technologies. Because, and to conclude here, it is clear to me that floating offshore wind and ocean energy technologies have a very important role to play in the overall transition to climate neutrality. I would like to thank you again for the very nice discussion, for accepting to be on this panel. I hope you found it useful. Personally, I did, and I hope also our audience find this discussion very useful as well. Thank you very much.